First, as I mentioned, who uses a green bin? So second question, does your green bin look like A or B? And just put that into the chat. Yeah, there's a big difference there. So I can't really see anybody's chat, so I'm gonna just move on from that. So obviously the picture labeled A is not ideal. So that's composed of mostly what's considered avoidable food waste. So if we look back, there's like a burger, you can see the actual food compared to B. And avoidable food waste refers to food items that could have been consumed if better managed. So examples of avoidable food waste are leftovers from a meal, expired food, stale food, blemished fruits and vegetables, and all of that. Unavoidable food waste, as you can see from picture B, are the parts of the food that were not intended for consumption. So the bones, peels, eggshells, that sort of thing. But that being said, using the green bin is a far better option than throwing food out in the regular garbage. So according to the Government of Canada's website, an estimated 13% of fruits and vegetables grown in Canada are discarded following harvest. So 60% of food produced in Canada is thrown away each year. Of that, 20% was avoidable food waste or food that could have been eaten. It amounts to 11.2 million metric tons of food being disposed of that could have been eaten. For the average Canadian household, that amounts to 140 kilograms of wasted food per year at a cost of more than $1,700 per year. So in total, over 35 million tons of food waste each year is costing Canadians in excess of $49 billion. So I'm going to be throwing out a lot of statistics here. Just bear with me. A lot of them are repeated, but it's just to show you the enormous amount of food that is wasted. So all sorts of food is wasted, but in Canada, the most predominantly wasted food by weight are fruits and vegetables, and then it's leftovers, bread and bakery, dairy, and eggs. So to put that into perspective, every day in Canada, Canadians waste the equivalent of 130,000 heads of lettuce, 1.3 million tomatoes, 2.6 million potatoes, 650,000 loaves of bread, 1.3 million apples, 640,000 bananas, 1 million cups of milk, and nearly 500,000 eggs. And remember, Canada is a pretty small country compared to other wealthy countries like the US. In 2020, Halton Environmental Network, which is our parent organization, partnered with VCMI, which is Value Chain Management International, to study food waste in Oakville. The purpose of this study was to establish a defendable estimate of the amount of food loss and waste, called FLW, that resulted in carbon dioxide emissions equivalent, so CO2e, generated by households in Oakville, and identify causal factors that result in avoidable food loss waste. The study's results are intended to guide the development of public and private initiatives that will lead to reduced FLW and less CO2 equivalent emissions through prevention and the improved management of organic waste streams. So basically, HEN, which is Halton Environmental Network, and VCMI partnered together to study food waste in Oakville. And it's so we could guide future policies when it came to municipal waste. The study found that in Oakville, and remember there are a number of caveats to this study, such as it was a relatively small sample size, that study participants discarded approximately 1.7 kilograms of food loss waste per person per week. Now, this is 40% less than the national average estimated by BCMI when they did their study in 2019, which was 2.8 kilograms per person per week. Based on the average household being 2.9 persons, this equates to an average weekly food waste per household of 4.2 kilograms. Similar to the national study, fruits and vegetables were the most predominantly wasted food by weight, but interestingly enough, grains had the highest proportion of avoidable waste. In other words, if I want to reduce the amount of by limiting food waste, we can also reduce the unavoidable food waste too. So in other words, if I wanted to reduce the amount of vegetable waste I produce every day, I would presumably also start to reduce the amount of unavoidable food waste too. So to put that in other words, say I was making a dish with mashed potatoes. If I know it's only going to feed 4 people, I make enough for 4 people. And instead of making enough for an army, then I'm not peeling as many potatoes. So that unavoidable food waste, the peels, isn't also going into the green bin. And household waste isn't even the entire story. We need to look at the whole picture. So where else is food waste a problem? And for that, we need to compare food waste to food loss. So when we talk about food waste, we are generally referring to food that is wasted because of consumer behavior. Wasted food is food that has been packaged or canned, but was discarded because it had expired while sitting on the shelf at the grocery store or your home pantry. It also includes unfinished meals or undercooked food that was simply thrown away. Food loss, on the other hand, most often occurs at the production, post-harvest, and processing stages of the food chain. And while food loss can occur because of factors such as quality and aesthetics, similar to food waste, it is typically driven by infrastructure limitations, climate, and environmental factors. A report by Second Harvest, which is an agency in Toronto that collects surplus food throughout the supply chain and distributes it to other agencies, ranging from shelters to drop-in centers, estimates that 4.82 million tons of food, or nearly $21 billion worth of food, is wasted during the processing and manufacturing process. So if food waste is a result of consumer behavior, food loss is a result of decisions or actions in this food supply chain. So think inadequate packaging, or as you heard fairly recently, shipping containers getting stuck in canals half a world away. Either way, through food waste or food loss, we are seeing fresh produce being removed from the supply chain during sorting operations because it deviates from what is considered optimal. So for example, it's the wrong shape, size, or color. Also, foods that are close to, at, or beyond the best before date are often discarded by retailers and consumers. At the end of the day, large quantities of wholesome, edible food are often unused or left over and discarded from household kitchens and eating establishments, and we need to do something about that. So why the distinction? Well, food waste is easier to solve. Educate the public and food wastage should decrease. Food loss, however, depends on improving logistics around farming, transportation, and storage. So that's something that's going to take a little bit longer to go back to the farmer and re-educate and get better supply chain management in place. So, and as we'll get to, less food loss and waste could lead to more efficient land use and better water resource management with positive impacts on climate change and livelihoods. So it's been determined by a number of studies and a little bit of common sense that household food waste is disposed of in one or more of the following ways. So it's either going to go in your green bin, your black bin, which is your regular garbage, a backyard composter, a garburator, which has its own set of issues, or to pets. Organic and kitchen waste make up about 30% of the waste disposed by Canadian households. So studies indicate that produce, such as fruits and vegetables, breads and cereals, are the most wasted food groups in Canadian homes. In larger cities like Toronto, 20% of all food waste ends up in the landfill. And in Vancouver, 25% of all residential garbage comes from uneaten and spoiled food. So for comparison, approximately 12% of Canada's avoidable food loss and waste occurs during the retail phase of the supply chain. And recent data collected from companies in the food service industry, including hotels, restaurants, and institutions, indicates the proportion of food purchased for sale by these establishments that became waste is significant. So we're talking 21% of dairy, eggs, and field crops, 38% of produce, and 20% of meat is thrown away yearly. So according to some research, about 4.82 million tons of food is lost or wasted during the processing and manufacturing process. So thankfully in Canada, most food loss that occurs before it reaches the supermarket is primarily used for land applications, such as composting, anaerobic digestions, and animal feed, rather than being destined for the landfill. So just a little FYI for you, in Hamilton, they have an anaerobic digestion process, which is used to produce heat and it powers its city. So done properly, it can be used as an alternative energy source. So why is reducing food waste important? This is why everybody's here today to learn this. So in Canada, 2.38 million metric tons, so approximately the weight of 20 CN towers, or $10.4 billion of avoidable or potentially edible food waste is generated in the home. This represents approximately 21% of food loss and waste along the entire food chain. Wasted food is important on many levels, and it impacts all parts of the food supply chain. So for example, the cost of producing food that goes uneaten affects farmers and business owners as well as our economy. Consumers are faced with higher food prices and lose money when food spoils at home or gets thrown out as waste. Another reason why preventing food waste is so important is because there are numerous households in Canada that are food insecure. The latest figure that we saw during the pandemic is that 1 in 7 households in Oakville is food insecure. Food insecurity can range from marginally food insecure, so that's when you're not too sure if you're going to be able to have enough food before the next paycheck comes in, to severe, when people must skip meals in order to get by. So not all food that is wasted can be saved and eaten, but a lot of food waste could be prevented, especially at home. And food waste also affects the environment, since resources such as water are used to produce the food are wasted too. In addition, much of the food that is tossed out winds up in landfills, and over time this causes changes in the Earth's climate, which is what we will explore in a few minutes. So here, we're going to have a short clip from the Food Wastage Foodprint Project. And it's going to sum up what I've been saying. It's just a short little video. Actually, I'm going to see if I'm going to.
I was going to say, let's give it a go, Helen.
Let's give it a go. Can we see
Success.
This?
Yes.
Great.
Each year, 1/3 of all the food the world produces is lost or wasted. Not only does this mean an economic loss, it means that all of the natural resources used for growing, processing, packaging, transporting, and marketing that food were also wasted. Imagine 28% of the world's agricultural land grows crops that are wasted. That equals the total land area of China, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan. Plus the water wasted in growing those crops equals the annual flow rate of Zambezi or the Volga rivers, an amount that could cover all the world's household water needs. And as agriculture and fisheries expand into wild areas, overexploit natural resources, forest and marine habitats are lost, along with their biodiversity. Above all, wasted food emits some 3.3 gigatons of greenhouse gases. If this were a country, it would represent the 3rd largest emitting country in the world. This cannot continue. With a future of more people and fewer resources, we cannot afford to throw our natural resources out with the garbage. Let's do something about wastage. Food producers.
There we go. So let's break down that video. One of the obvious reasons to reduce food waste for many people is that it costs money. However, wasted food also results in wasted nutrients. So fruits, vegetables, dairy products, and seafood are often the foods that are wasted the most. It's been estimated that approximately 1,200 calories of food are wasted daily. So when we think of the nutrition these foods provide, that amounts to losses of protein, dairy, fiber, and vitamins and minerals, such as calcium and vitamin D. And remember, the daily caloric, the recommended daily caloric input for most adults is between 2,000 and 2,500 calories of food. So losing 1,200 calories is a pretty big deal when we have food insecure families in Canada. So as mentioned, with that Halton Environmental Network study with BCMI to study food waste in Oakville, one interesting thing they discovered, and this isn't conclusive because the study size wasn't really large enough, was that respondents from neighborhoods that are in the medium low and medium quintiles of income have higher average food waste than those in the lowest and highest income quintiles. So this was thought to be because the respondents in those quintiles were buying food on promotion or buying in bulk to save money more often than the other groups. But then you can see the irony of what's happening here. So because now they're losing money and nutrients because they're wasting the food. And to be honest, or sorry, to be clear, like, I'm not blaming the victim. Walk into any grocery store and you can see that millions of dollars are spent on advertising food products and sales. So packages are colored just so, and they're all in pretty little containers to catch our eye. There's also, if you walk around the grocery store, you'll notice certain things are placed at certain levels to target certain audiences. So if you've ever wondered why sugary cereals are always in that kind of waist height level, it's because it's advertising to kids. And I mean, who among us hasn't walked into a grocery store and stuck 100% to your grocery list? I mean, I know I haven't, and I'm sure other people here today have not either. So now the climate change link. Along every step of the supply chain, from seed to skillet, there's the potential to negatively impact the environment. This includes the emissions produced before the food even reaches your plate. So primary production, processing, manufacturing, distribution, retail, and transportation along the whole value chain. So food's carbon footprint, or food print, is the greenhouse gas emissions produced by growing, rearing, farming, processing, transporting, storing, cooking, and disposing of the food you eat. So a little bit of a play on words to say the food print rather than the footprint. So right from the get-go, farmers till the land to plant the seeds, but tilling exposes carbon in the soil to oxygen, where it converts to carbon dioxide. The tractors, they run on diesel, so that's releasing more carbon dioxide through their exhaust. The fertilizer spread on fields produces nitrous oxide. And in Canada, we use fresh water to irrigate our crops. It is estimated that agriculture accounts for 26% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And we are at this point nowhere near getting that loaf of bread to your table. There are the transport trucks that get the seeds to the farm and then the grains from the farm to the processing facility. The building where the food is processed uses energy. The car you use to go to the shops uses fuel and emits emissions. The packaging, which is almost always plastic. I mean, on and on it goes. So as part of the study that I've mentioned a couple of times, Hen put out this very great graphic. I'll just give you a second to look at this. And as you can see from this, although meat is not wasted as much as other food groups, it does have a much higher food print than other products. And so one of the reasons I think meat isn't wasted as much as the other food groups is because we value it more, because it costs more. So, I mean, personally, if I see somebody throwing out a steak, it creates a bit more of a response in me than somebody who throws out half a sandwich or, the leftover bits from their salad. It just feels very different. So it's a very unpopular thought right now that food is too cheap. And I know inflation is hitting us all very hard, and staples like pasta have gone up as much as 18%. But I don't think we're paying the true price for our food to get to our table. And I can guarantee you, if food prices were higher, we would all treat it as much as the precious resource that it is, and we wouldn't waste it as much. So now we have all that energy that's been put into getting that tub of yogurt into your fridge. But you put the milk and the peanut butter in front of it, and then weeks go by, and then suddenly you remember, oh yeah, I did buy yogurt. So you pull it out, but you check the date on the top, and it says, I don't know, what are we at, April 27th now? It says April 20th. I don't know if I'm going to trust it. So you throw it out. Do you think compost or regular garbage? I mean, who really wants to spoon out all that yogurt into your green bin and then rinse the container to put into your blue bin? Well, hopefully this will help you decide. Methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And it's a significant contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. Decomposing organic material in anaerobic conditions like that found in a landfill releases methane into the atmosphere. And the methane is what's happening when food breaks down. But if you put that yogurt into the green bin, it is composted by the region using an aerobic process. So aerobic means the bacteria uses oxygen, and anaerobic, there is no oxygen. And using the oxygen for the aerobic process, you're reducing or preventing the release of methane. And if you need another reason not to throw out your food, if you build up too much methane and it suddenly mixes with air, explosions can occur. In 2005, a landfill near Bandung, Indonesia, and I'm very sorry if I mispronounced that, was hit by a landslide after days of heavy rain. That landslide created the conditions for methane, which was trapped underneath the garbage, to be exposed to the air. The result was an explosion that directly and indirectly led to the deaths of 143 people. So what you are seeing in the top picture is the landslide and how far it ended up spreading. And then in the bottom picture, what looks like steam is actually still the smoke and the emissions that are being released after that explosion. And that's not the only time that has occurred. So wasting food means we are wasting the resources used to grow, produce, and distribute the food to consumers. Getting food from farm to table and then managing or disposing of food as waste also has a significant carbon footprint, contributing to Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. And it all adds up. As you can see here, Canada's 2.3 million tons of avoidable household food waste is equivalent to 9.8 million tons of carbon dioxide and 2.1 million cars on the road. Every ton of household food waste that is avoided is equivalent of taking one car off the road each year. Diverting food waste to composting is better than sending it to a landfill, but preventing food from being wasted in the first place is an even better way to lessen our impact on the environment. It's been estimated that billions of pounds of food are thrown away each year across the globe. That's roughly 130 kilograms of food per year for the average North American. Although food is wasted throughout the food supply chain, consumers are responsible for the majority of wasted food that ends up in the landfills. Some of the reasons listed as sources of food waste in this slide may apply to more than one source in the food chain. So for example, restaurants may purchase more food than is needed or fail to rotate their stock appropriately, causing food to spoil and be thrown out. But of course, that also happens at the consumer level, where people buy too much food at one time, or they fail to notice the date stamps on their food, and they end up throwing out as well. So how can we reduce food wastage? And here's what I want to hear from you. So put some ideas in the chat function, and we want to hear ways that you have reduced food wastage at home or ways that you know of. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to let me know what's put in the chat function.
Certainly. So I meal plan. That's one of the ways I like to be more mindful about my food consumption. So I like to have a plan for the week of, at very least, my lunches and dinners, so I can have my grocery shopping, lined up, and then I'm not buying anything I don't necessarily need. I'm sticking to the food plan for the week.
Yes, excellent. That's one of the ways we're going to list in a moment, but exactly, that's a great way to stop food wastage.
We got some more answers in the chat. Buy groceries many times per week to buy only what we are going to eat. Mm-hmm. And another one in the chat is don't peel vegetables. Use eggshells in the garden and save veggie bits for stock. Oh, that's a good one.
That is a good one. Excellent. So how to prevent food waste. So it's almost the same for ours that are used to prevent wastage of all types, the wastage of plastics and all the rest. So the first one, refuse. So opt for smaller meals, and if you're still hungry, have seconds rather than piling a whole bunch of food on your plate and then not eating all of it and it ends up in either the green bin or the garbage bin. The second one is reduce. So reduce the amount of food wasted, of which we'll share the tips in a moment. Reuse. So if you have leftovers, make them into other meals. Or recycle, and that means compost in this case. So I'm going to introduce you maybe to a new term. Maybe you've heard this term before. It's called gleaning. So gleaning is the act of collecting leftover crops from farmers' fields after they've been commercially harvested or on fields where it's not economically profitable to harvest. It is a practice described in the Hebrew Bible that became illegally enforced entitlement of the poor in a number of Christian kingdoms. So way, 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 way back. Modern day dumpster diving is seen as a similar form of food recovery. In many parts of Europe, including England and France, the biblically derived right to glean the fields was reserved for the poor. So it was a right enforceable by law that continues into parts of Europe in modern times. In 18th century England, gleaning was a legal right for cottagers or landless residents. Gleaning was an important source of income for laboring families at a time when many parishes were affected by land enclosures and the transformation of property rights. So what would happen is, like in a small village, the officer of the church would often ring a church bell at 8 o'clock in the morning and then again at 7 o'clock at night to tell gleaners when to begin and end work. But unfortunately, this legal right effectively ended after there were a number of escalating conflicts between landowners and gleaners. In the modern world, gleaning is practiced by humanitarian groups, which distribute the gleaned food to the poor and hungry. In a modern context, this can include the collection of foods from supermarkets at the end of the day that would otherwise be thrown away. And there are a number of organizations that practice gleaning to resolve issues of societal hunger. Volunteers of these organizations can visit a farm where the farmer donates what is left in their fields for donations for food banks. So can you guys think of any local food groups that do food recovery? I'd like to hear if you have anything in the chat room. And if anybody has heard of any groups that do this food rescue. So one is Food for Life. It's a very common one throughout Halton. They purchase from wholesalers, producers, farmers, and what they're doing is getting below grade but still very edible food to redistribute to the community. Second Harvest is another one. That's actually Canada's largest food rescue charity. And there are also other groups that collect what is in grocery stores that they feel they can't sell due to imperfections, and so they resell it at a discounted price. So I know one company, unfortunately it's in the States, but my sister-in-law used to subscribe to it. And it was called the Ugly Fruit Club or movement. I'm not sure exactly its name. And it was exactly that. So everything that didn't look, like your perfect apple or your perfect banana, then it was put in this box and it would be, you would buy a subscription and you would get it weekly to your door. So almost like the food boxes that people can order now, but it was all full of what's considered ugly fruit and vegetables. And it's a great way, like it's perfectly edible. There's no reason to throw it out other than it's just not what we consider, aesthetically pleasing or what we consider the norm. So it's a great way. I don't really know of any in Canada, unfortunately, but I think it's a great way to reuse produce. So other ways to help prevent food waste: plan your meals, as we mentioned before, based on foods you already have. So look in the refrigerator, freezer, and pantry first for foods that need to be used up. Find recipes for those ingredients, and then write a list of food items that you still need. And as also mentioned, plan your meals and snacks in advance. That'll help you, again, use the food that you have on hand. And now it may be hard to resist sales or be tempted by foods that you see at a store. However, it's best to shop with a list and only buy the amount of food that you or your family will eat or freeze within a few days. Foods that are likely to spoil quickly should be easy to see so that you remember to use them. So use a fruit bowl on the counter so that everybody can see it, and grab an apple, and it ends up being a healthier way to eat as well. And remember that fresh fruits and vegetables ripen at different times, so it's important to store produce properly. So you need to learn what belongs in the fridge and what needs to not stay in the fridge. And you need to also educate yourself on which foods can be stored together. I don't know if anybody knows this, but you really shouldn't store onions and potatoes together. Onions off gas, which causes potatoes to spoil a little bit quicker.
Hmm.
And as with other foods, to prevent spoilage, buy only the amount of fresh fruits and vegetables that you can use within a few days. Wash it just before using it. If you wash it too early, you can cause it to spoil, especially things like mushrooms. And then learn which fruits and vegetables should be stored in the refrigerator. So apples and oranges tend to fare a little bit better when stored in the refrigerator, but obviously bananas, they will get quite brown very quickly if stored in the fridge.
Helen, we also had a few people in the chat mention that they freeze a lot of their food to prevent spoilage.
Oh yes, absolutely. That is a great way to prevent. And you're going to hear a video coming up all about what interesting things that I didn't even know you could start freezing. So another factor that contributes to food waste is the confusion that exists about what dates on foods and drinks mean. So as you can see from this slide, there are several dates that appear on food and drink packaging. So unfortunately, many people consider these to be expiration dates, but that might not be the case. So food manufacturers provide these dates based on what they consider to be the best quality for that specific food item. So for example, use by, best by, and best before dates are often found on condiments such as mustard and ketchup. But in many cases, these items are safe to eat well beyond that date stamp if they've been stored properly. Sell by dates, which are used for perishables such as meat and dairy, it is still possible to eat those foods days after that date, as long as they were stored at a safe temperature. And really that's the key, is the storage of food. With that being said, always practice good food safety. So regardless of the date stamped, don't risk food poisoning by eating anything that you think might have been spoiled. So eat your leftovers within 3 to 4 days or freeze them. And remember that food pathogens can't often be smelled or tasted. It's only something that you'll learn the effects of after the fact. And some interesting things, I took a biology course years ago, and it was all about food organisms that grow on food. And I didn't know this, but there is a pathogen that can live on lettuce that will give you food poisoning up to 3 months after you've consumed it. So people talk about the stomach flu. There's actually no such thing as the stomach flu. Flu only really gives you those feelings of, like you feel like you've been hit by a Mack truck and you've got that headache, high fever, and all the things that we're learning right now through COVID. But when it's food poisoning and you're throwing up, that's usually the key that you've got food poisoning, is the vomiting or other symptoms like that. So there's, like I said, no such thing as the stomach flu. What you most likely have is food poisoning. I can't now. All right, now I can't go forward. Oh, yeah, there we go. So more ways to prevent food waste. So get creative with your leftovers. So if you buy one of those pre-cooked chickens, or maybe you buy a chicken and you make it into a meal, but you've got lots left over, think about making it into soups or salads or sandwiches the next day, or meat pie, anything. Like the possibilities are endless of what you can come up with for leftovers. And so don't always think that, oh, well, I made a chicken and some veggies on the side, and now Monday I'm going to have chicken with veggies on the side, and Tuesday I'm going to have chicken with veggies on the side. shred the chicken now and put it into a tortilla and add a little bit of cheese and maybe warm it up, grill it, or have it cold. There's just endless ways to use leftovers. But of course, oh, man, if you do have food waste, use the compost, because as we've gone through, putting it in the landfill is just not an option. I don't know if anybody had a chance. I suppose you can't see me, can you? Can you see me?
Not when you're sharing your screen.
Oh, okay, I didn't think so. I don't know if anybody got a chance to read the Oakville Beaver just on April 21st. Their headline was all about their collective actions are making a difference, and it was about what percentage of Oakville residents are using the green bin, and 75% of Oakville residents are using it, so that's fabulous. Unfortunately, it still leaves 25% that are not. So if we can get everybody to get on board, that would be perfect. All right, so now we have a little video. So we were fortunate enough to be able to speak to Chef Julia. Ooh, hang on, I'm just going to pause this for a second. She is owner and operator and head chef of Returno, a restaurant in Oakville. So she gave some great tips on how to keep food longer and use food in a way that was new to me. Maybe it won't be new to some of you guys, and to prevent food waste. So at the beginning, it's just going to be her introduction to introduce who she is. And then we have some great food waste coming up in the video. Well, welcome, Chef Julia Hanna. We're so pleased you could join us today. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh my goodness. That's when you've lived as long as I have, that's a long introduction. But I am thrilled to be here because I have always been a fan of your work. And I think that right now, especially after the pandemic, we have been taught a few hard truths and hard lessons. And I think the Halton Environmental Network is an organization right now that's going to have the prominence that it's fought and so well deserved to have, because it's about protecting not just ourselves today, but protecting the future for our children, which is something that's near and dear to me as a restaurateur. So I am a restaurateur. I've owned restaurants. I will say next year will be my 40th year of owning restaurants. So obviously insanity is in my family, because that's not something anyone normal person should do for 40 years. And I have a restaurant called Returno right now, which is in North Oakville at Trafalgar and Dundas. And all my restaurants previously were in the downtown Oakville. And my life is about food. And I have watched what's happened with food over the years. And the shifts that we've made, some are so wonderful and positive, but some need attention. And I think that's what we're trying to address today, right?
Absolutely. So today we actually have brought you on to help us deal with food waste, which is
Right.
such an issue right now. Like as people have realized, even immediately right now. So obviously during the whole COVID pandemic, where there was issues of food insecurity, and now with supply chain management, and people realizing, where does my food come from? And maybe I don't have access to what I thought I had access to. We're realizing we should not be wasting such a valuable resource and taking it for granted. And I think we're finally waking up to that. And hopefully you're going to give us some tips and tricks on how not to waste our food and not to take this precious resource for granted.
Well, I think this has been an issue for decades now. I think the realization, one thing, when we look at this pandemic and what it's done to us and the destruction and the havoc that it has brought to us, we were unwilling participants in it. If we don't take a breath and look at what it's taught us and learn a few things that will make our lives better moving forward, then the pandemic has done even more damage, right? Mm-hmm. And I really think what the pandemic has done is made us, because we were forced to stop, we were forced to look at how we are doing things. And we were like, my grandmother used to say, when you join the band, they're going to make you march. And what she meant by that is, if you just go with the status quo, everybody's moving, everybody's like, we have to get here, we have to do this, we have to own this, we have to go travel here. And everyone's on that, trajectory, then you're not stopping to think, is this for me? Is this what I really want? Is this bringing me happiness? And now guess what? We're going, oh, wow, maybe that wasn't working so well. And one of the main areas where that realization has hit right here is with food and how we handle food, our relationship with food, our respect for food, right? And that is something now that we have to fight to hold on to that feeling so that we protect our food and we protect and be mindful. The whole thing today now, the word is mindfulness. What mindfulness is just being present, just not being so distracted by all these things that we felt were important that we're not focusing on what we're doing that moment. And food has been the greatest victim of that. And that's how the waste has come to be, because we haven't thought about it. I'll tell you a quick story. My grand
And I'm just gonna skip ahead a little bit. Just to some of her practices she uses to prevent food waste. Absolutely. All right, so let's get started then with, I see you've got some vegetable
Right.
sprouts there and
Right. Okay, so what if we talk about food waste? I think for me, everything is about being prepared to cook. So if you want to prevent food from being wasted, then have things available that you can ensure that you're going to prepare it and cook it, because you don't have to start from scratch with everything. One of my absolute favorite all-time life foods. We use it at the restaurant. I use it here at home. I'm going to quickly grab one here. I'm off. I'm going to be right back. I promise you. And I'm going to show you the end result. This is what we call a sofrito. And I make it, and it's the flavor base for anything. You can use this for soups, in your tomato sauce. You're sauteing chicken. A spoon of this will just give it that zing, which is what we're looking for, because we want our senses. We want that food taste all the time. And all it is celery, carrots, and onions. And garlic. We don't add garlic to the sofrito mix because garlic is something that cooks differently, and it comes in after you've cooked the sofrito for a while. So the French call it mirepoix, right? The Spanish call it sofrito also, the same combination. Sometimes they add peppers to it, but to me, this is again the most neutralizing: carrots, celery, and onions. And it's 2 parts carrots to 1 part celery, right? And if you want to do it, that is something easy. These little mini food processors, as you know, as a chef, I have all the big guns because that's what I do, right? That's my living. But if I'm every day and I'm cooking every day, and you have no idea how often I use this little baby, right? And I'm just going to chop some carrots up. You're going to trust me that I'm going to do it to the right parts. This part of celery, this good stuff, this leafy stuff, don't use that. Save that for salad. You slice that, chop this part and add it to a salad. It's that zing that people go, what does that taste? I know what that is, and how come? What am I tasting? And it's just celery. Oh, come and say hello. Come and say hi. You have to say hi to someone here. This is our Rocco. Oh, say hi, Rocco. Say hi, Rocco. Rocco Rooney, we call him. He's my food taster, right? He's already ready now. That treats him in thing. So, okay, let's throw some celery. He wants to get in. He's a camera hog too, eh? Let me tell you. Okay, now the onions.
Wait, so as you're doing that, we can't see your knife skills. So are you just rough cutting
sorry,
this
why don't
or?
we get rid of this guy here. How's that? Let's
Oh,
do this.
perfect.
Move this out of the way. Okay, as you can see, I always have garlic in a bowl. It's ready for me, right? And I'm going to show you what to do with onions and garlic after too, okay? Because if you have it frozen in your freezer, you're less likely. Here's the thing: you come home from work, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Now I got to chop onions. Now I got to chop garlic. Now I got to chop celery. Now I got to chop. Give me a break. You're not going to do it. You're just going to be overwhelmed. So, but if you have a couple of hours on the weekend that you can set this up in your freezer. So now see this. This here will all go into a stock pot. Don't get rid of this. All this stuff, keep it to the side, put it in with a big pot of water and let it boil. Give it 2 or 3 hours. And now you have this beautiful flavored stock that you can use in your food. right? And you do the same thing with the carrot peelings, and then you add flavor to your food. It's vegetarian, which is a good thing, right?
And was that
So you
skin
wanna-
and all with the onion, or? That the skin included on that?
Yes,
as well?
the skin, yeah, I put everything in, because then I
Oh.
just strain it. Again,
okay.
simplify, right? So now my onions are in here. Okay, this guy is like a beast, this little machine. And it works for me because, you know, when we're on camera, it doesn't always want to cooperate.
All right, so I will pause there because there were technical difficulties with the blender and it took a long time. But she just had some fabulous tips on how to use food in a better manner so that it wasn't wasted as much. So she froze garlic, she froze the onions so that you just pull them out and you're ready to use them in a meal. I learned a lot from that from interview. So if you are interested in learning more, there's some wonderful documentaries. Some of them were available on Netflix. I don't know if they still are. One of them was Kiss the Ground. Great, great movie. Just Eat It, a food waste story, and Taste the World, Food Inc. Sustainable. And just do more. Use your green bin. Start a backyard composter or try verm composting. Support Halton Region Compost Giveaway Days, which is coming up May 9th to May 15th. Learn more about food waste and food loss. So go to our Halton Environmental Network website and read the study. And of course, always be mindful of what you are throwing away. So thank you very much for joining us. If you need to get in touch, here's all our handles: Instagram at halton.food, Twitter at Halton Food, Facebook Halton Food, and we are www.haltonfood.ca. There we go. Thank you very much for joining today.
Well, I'm sorry, I was muted and I was talking. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. Very informative.
Yeah,
So
so
I
a
just
lot of facts and figures, and I wasn't trying to, you know, sound like a professor up there, just kind of screeching and going off on people. But it's just important to realize, like, this, how many billions of dollars are wasted when it comes to food. Like, it's mind-boggling, and quite frankly, it's shameful as a society.
thank you so much for sharing. Everyone's saying thank you, but I just wanted to mention that a few other people did mention in the chat that there's an organization in Toronto that apparently picks fruit off of residential vines and they donate it. I'd love to know what that group is. And a lot of people are mentioning that freezing and having those stock bags are also really handy to cut back on your food waste. So thank you for sharing all of your great tips in the chat, guys. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Helen, this was a wonderful presentation. Before we let Helen go, does anybody have any questions for her? Thank you. So just kind of following up what Helen mentioned with those great documentaries, if you don't have access to Netflix or they're not available there, come into your local library branch. We can show you some equivalent videos or perhaps even find those ones ourselves for you. But if nobody has any other questions, thank you so much for attending this session today. Helen, that was wonderful. We all learned a lot and we feel much more empowered to be more proactive with our waste. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you all for joining me, and thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful. So have a lovely day, everybody. We'll see you next time.